So where would you like to start with that one? You want me to roll it all the way back to
Sun Girl.
Sun Girl?
How the themes have come to you subconsciously and how it's easier to communicate through the subconscious versus convincing the conscious mind.
Yeah, so these ideas come to me subconsciously, and I've progressed myself in my journey from a neophyte to adept in the esoteric realm, or sphere of things, to where I do things, and I do it intentionally while not questioning the intention at the current time of iteration. Does Lewis Hamilton think break, or does it become a secondary nature because he's driven Monaco 1,000 times in his head and probably hundreds of times in real life? Or how many punches has Bruce Lee thrown to where he's being told, hey, the camera is able to pick up the speed since we're making a movie here, and this isn't like a fight to the death or like a dojo situation. Slow it down, because you've gotten to the point where like you're passing the speed of the human eye, because you've done whatever you're doing so many times, or you practice so many other concepts of what you're doing, to where you're you pass the threshold. It's like putting fuel in a rocket ship. The rocket ship has fuel and it's now taking off. Whatever happens from there going up, it's going.
Upward momentum.
So, referring to like going through my archives dating back 2 decades of my own information, a decade of solid esoteric information, diving into this, my own private catalog, like things will stand out to me. So, speaking on America and my previous pieces of my own works that I collect, of all my ideas on one thing, things that stand out to me, like I said before, are things that like certain individuals have said after a long time of saying a bunch of things that kind of added up and stacked up. So like in my research growing up, what is the validity, or like how do you just say some player ass shit and just let it drop and let it just marinate? Like, let's take Malcolm X and Martin Luther King's like last few speeches. What is a definition that was never expounded upon? What does Plymouth Rock landed on America supposed to mean? And how do you explore the depths of that? And then just keep talking about completely other things. A whole other subject goes on. But you're just dropping this like theoretical boulder, which is literally what it's a huge rock, and you're just leaving it there for its own psychoanalysis later on. And like for my years of research and this other things I've looked into, it's always stood out to me like saying some player ass shit and just letting it marinate on its own. You only do that when the gravity is so heavy you stop speaking to the actual frontal lobe of individuals and you're speaking to the subconscious. The CIA knows this better than anyone else. Better than on the surface level of people versus like going into esotericism, like spirituality or Eastern medicine practices. Things within the realm of like woo-woo magical abilities are just like the unseen. Schrodinger's cat, same concept. It's just in scrolls versus books. When you speak to the subconscious, the same way like the screen can, or new screens, iPhone screens, at the level of its flicker rate, or your computer screens, the flicker rate in itself is like a subconscious Morse code that has been developed. Again, these are concepts on TED Talks and just other various inventions within the AI space or just the technology space. What's this communicating? And so I find, like, again, like I said, I mentioned that was one of his later speeches, or Martin Luther King's, some of his speeches. I have to refer back to the concept I'm thinking of, but it's around the same subject matter, and like energy behind it, where it wasn't really explained. What was the information so valuable as a person who does communicate for a living, and they speak on a bunch of topics and they communicate like a whole plethora of these ideas, and looking out for the best of mankind and people, humans, all these things. What made someone like that, who explains a lot of things and kind of shows a way to just drop something that was not meant for the person listening, but for the person's subconscious? And that's when it becomes an art form. Reduction. From Matisse's reduction to Pablo Picasso's reduction, you get to the point where in Mondrian's production, like, to go from being a landscape artist to using 3 primary colors and lines, to a level of like skipping of walking through the line and progressing to the front and going from the conscious to the subconscious, that's being discussed. And that comes with confidence in knowing oneself, and that knowing oneself can come through like grinding an axe or a knife to stone, or hammering a samurai knife and hardening the carbon 5,000 times and folding it over. It can come in various forms, but this sharpness to cut through the conscious, the subconscious, is what makes fine art fine art. So, knowing this is done, and we have a hand gesture and a sign that appears reminiscent or adjacent to the American dollar sign, the US dollar sign. Knowing that this is done, as soon as it's done, is trusting the subconscious that I've also spent time and effort breaking down and comprehending the connection between the conscious and subconscious, and why things that are said consciously then attach and mean this in the subconscious, is how I got to the simplicity of this. And by simplicity, when the weight of the gravity, what's being said, is loud enough, you kind of just want to leave it alone. So culturally speaking, I'm going to start from the beginning with it. This here means a significant amount, due to the fact that growing up in an American melanated like nest egg, the theme of gangsters, or the traditional term, going all the way back to Scarface, Howard Hughes' Scarface, to gangster movies now. There's a connection between just America as a whole, and connecting to striving and ascending to higher levels than the starting place, which is something that in all avenues, whether it is criminality, art, or regular society, that America champions. That's what you could call forms of the American dream. There's a connection between seeing this in the grails of Scorsese films and movies I've seen countless times, and to come full circle in my own personal development of self, in getting into other various practices of Eastern and researching how they operate, into Vedic, particularly, and in this case, mudras, and looking into various hand signs that are used from studying ancient art or just art history in general, and seeing the Buddha with this sitting on the lotus leaf in either Tibetan, particularly in my case, I was Tibetan art, to studying Renaissance art, and looking at the Christ holding up this same symbol, just in a different hand position. And then going in to find out the meaning of that within, it dates back to mudras, or the Indian practice of mudras, which is, simple terms, yoga for the hands. So it just does the same thing of stretching the fascia, or like the energy in one's body, and having it move in a way that one uses their mind to determine the direction of. To find out that this is the mudra for wealth and attraction to wealth is something that stands out to me, because I find people don't do things for no reason. Whether that reason is known consciously or subconsciously, that speaks on the same thing. So to see these individuals who came, typically, as I depict, starting at one place socioeconomically, and then ending another place that's higher socioeconomically, and this being a motif that is seen throughout various films, and this gesture, and to come to find out it means wealth, was intriguing, and seeing how that came from connecting all people are people, humans are humans, we're all in this together in some form, souls in this journey. Seeing how this connects from an Eastern practice of yoga for the hands to gangster films by Scorsese is a connection that I found intriguing. And if, as it says in the mudras, it represents wealth, and they're showing individuals who are achieving a certain level of wealth from relatively where they started, connecting that to something that's always stood out to me with the image you see that is resemblant or adjacent to the US dollar sign is intriguing, especially knowing it came from a researcher that was inspired, the concept where it came to my eyes, of a researcher of money, and then this sign of money connects to a piece up here. And the symbology of this image, which is the layers, with the top of being the tree of knowledge. So it all connects to the tree of knowledge, just from top to bottom, and you see different layers beneath it. You're looking at things from a zoomed out perspective, or outside in, you can see the whole layer of it, and that's why the tree of knowledge is seen completely on the first layer, and then beneath you're just seeing parts of it, but you're seeing the same image kind of telegraphed through the 4 layers of it, but you're only seeing pieces after the first. So unless you're looking at it from the top perspective, with his perspective drawn, you're not going to be able to see the whole tree of knowledge. You're just seeing the base of it. The same concept applies to all symbols. So when I heard the concept, money is grown, money grows on trees, money tree, to, I heard the title, money is grown on the tree of knowledge. started connecting ideas, and this the notion that something that was a fiat money is just an agreement. It's an idea. So people got together and they had an idea that this thing that scientifically has zero value other than a fire starter. Like, you can take money if you need to start a fire. You can then burn this paper and you can start using kindling and then start a fire. That's the extent of its use practically, as far as the material that it is. So unlike gold or silver, which have conductive materials and properties, fiat currency is an agreement. And it's an agreement between all individuals participating that this is how it's value. And we're all going to agree this thing holds value that is a representation of what traditional money is. And it's something that came to my mind when thinking of this. Like, they don't send astronauts to space with their masks, with their helmets plastered with like dollar bills. It's saying, hey, this is going to protect you from the solar radiation. You can look at the sun for a second, you'll be good. While you're out repairing the ISS, you'll be fine. For some reason, they align it with like gold as a reflective material to either A, for the radiation protection, and lights as well. It goes in the interior or some part of the helmet. So seeing how this thing that is money and then also other thing that is money, but they have different uses, or the extent of their uses, was always interesting. And when I found this symbol and came to learn that it was a symbol for prosperity of Mercury, and that's going back to Greek and Roman, which is the foundation for our current society. And tying that to going back to my neophyte days of doing things strictly subconsciously while not being able to comprehend it consciously. I was always drawn to like mercurial aspects. I felt I had a mercurial nature in my trials going to this, in an infatuation or an interest in Hermes as the god, and even a story from his like birth in the lyre he produced and made, and his connection to Apollo, the sun, which goes back to another piece. They all seem to have this thread going through. I appreciate the concept that travel and commerce is the actual connection to money. So for some reason, money, the idea started. We can go back to the idea of taking it to France to Jerusalem. Very treacherous journey. So someone came up with the genius idea to put your money somewhere within France, these other countries, and place it in what they call like a bank, and then they give you this signed paper that says you have this much in the bank. You then made the journey, went to Jerusalem, got to a bank there, exchanged it, and got your money, which at the time was gold, silver, metals, precious metals, and then you exchanged it back and went back safely. So this once treacherous path, and people were going there, people along the way knew like, oh, this is a lick. Like, people are gonna be going this way, they're gonna be carrying all they have to get from here to here. If we just figure out a way to like grab it on the way there, then we just came up. That in itself is a risk. So you now reduce your risk and increase your survivability, because you're taking, they now know it's a thing, that anyone traveling no longer has their actual physical gold, silver, or precious things on them, and at least not in mass. And so the incentive to risk your own life to take something that they don't have on them, it just whittles the cost return benefit. This gets smaller and smaller, so you have less incentives, and you have a higher survivability. So that, if you go back to the painting, for me, is why this is there. It's why Mercury in travel is there. It's why the fiat concept of the dollar sign is almost there, but it's in its original form, and why, separate from the time the painting was done, and I had what I called my first time gessoing, but for some reason I felt the inclination to go with the red paint connected to. And all this stems back to is the Knights Templar and them being the original banks and having the means to take this thing and make it this thing, and then it all started within reason and everyone kind of agreed on this concept. So Knights Templar, money, Knights in this case, if I didn't explain it, the red represents the Knights Templar. So, in my choice of using white chalk as well, or excuse me, pardon me, whites, pastel, oil pastel, kind of brings it all together. So, if we're gonna speaking of like history and art history wise, the reason why I could say this is done subconsciously was because I knew all these things already, but consciously is through the method I just explained right now. From travel destinations, from the story I told till now, which brings in Mercury, to the story of money, from its origins of precious metals and other things, to precious things, finite things, to fiat currency, and the justification of why we all bought into this idea of fiat currency, because it made sense, survivability, math, calculations, all adds up to like, okay, let's all agree on this because this makes things a little bit smoother and your survivability increases. So it's about like life. To the idea of mudras, and mudras being something that's more on the esoteric side, and in my knowledge revolving around the Knights Templars in that same category, tying that to the red, and then tying that back to the idea of the what appears close to a dollar sign, what is actually the sign for prosperity of Mercury. Which it all ties back to original society that we're currently based on, which is Greek society. All these concepts were things that I was already thinking subconsciously, and it was able to connect and steered me toward the position and path where I could say, after I laid the drawing of the mudra down, tipped it with the sign for prosperity of Mercury, I was confident in knowing this is done. And I find the artist's job is to like reduce, extract, and elaborate all in a perfect blend into one thing. And I find when I explained and unpacked all those reasonings, this is it. Now, is it originally a feeling? But due to my time, like my own research and my own development of myself, I'm able to articulate the why that I felt now that I have reached a point of being in a depth of myself and knowing these things that I've learned over time well spent studying and researching these topics. And it just came together to a point to where I can communicate the subconscious consciously. And that's where I find my gift is a form of communication, whether that be verbally or that be with my hand painting. Together it's still a form of communication, and that's what the skills that I have are my personal gifts and the best of myself to share with the world. And that's why I paint. And beyond painting, that's why I find myself in this form as an artist, is communicating these things. And if you want to go back to the beginning regarding Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, these individuals who were great speakers had said things that made no sense, and because they weren't saying it to you directly. That's their version of art. They were saying it to the subconscious. And if enough time and percolation was able to take place, then it would get to the essence and you'll distill it. Just like alchemical practices from step one, calcination, to the end, the perfection, the philosopher's stone. It's a whole process of various forms of distilling and extracting to the pure self. Like Shrek onion peeling to the core. So the core of us is our torus, which is the shape of an apple, which has a core. All these things end up connecting back to itself. And that's why I'm able to determine when the art's complete, and it's why I'm an artist.